Yes.
Okay, don't stop recording. Let's just keep rolling. This is good. This sounds awesome, people. Hi! We're back!
Where am I? Who is this? What's going on?
You can see that time off we took was well spent. We have forgotten everything. So welcome back to Season 2, Episode 1 of Skeptics and Seekers. I am your host, David Johnson. I'm joined by the other guy.
Yep, I'm Dale, representing the Christian or Seeker side.
Yeah, but never mind him. More about me. So, anyway, glad to be back. Missed you guys. And so we're gonna get actually, I was gonna say we're gonna get right into it, but
we've got announcements.
Not.
Yeah,
we've got some housekeeping to do. But stick with us. It's gonna be a great show. I'm sorry about the audio quality up front. Some of the things that I was trying to fix from last season, it's not gonna get fixed probably for another 4 or 5 episodes. So I'm dumping all of the audio responsibilities onto Dale. So any complaints about audio, direct to Dale. And Dale, you have some announcements.
Sure. They love my recordings. The quality is just top notch. So yeah, I guess welcome back, audience, to Season 2. It's great to be starting up here. Just by way of some announcements. So things to look forward to in coming weeks. So I'm working on getting up my solo show for the Leibnizian cosmological argument on a series about the existence of God, looking at the positive and negative evidences. So I'm currently working. I'm going to be posting up my actual write-up as about 70-page write-up on that argument. So I'm just working out some details with that. Once that's done, I'll put up the podcast for you guys to listen to in about a week or two, in about a week or so. Secondly, we have some special guests coming up in the next few weeks already lined up for you guys. So our first special guest is going to be Dr. Tony Costa. He's coming on September 28th, so that's 2 weeks from today, to discuss the ontological argument as advanced by Saint Anselm, so his particular version of it. And also after that, David, who do we have coming the week after that? Do you know?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. It's
yeah. So I haven't nailed it down yet. Although I don't mind kind of pre-announcing it and putting some pressure on the guest. I don't think that would be a problem, actually. So, what do you think? Should we do it?
Well, I'm not sure you're talking. Are you talking about MB, or are you talking about someone else?
I'm talking about. I have no idea who.
Okay, so I'll give my thing, and I'm not. David's talking about something else, I think. So, after Dr. Tony Costa on September 28th, on the following week, October 5th, we're having Dr. Michael Brown come on to discuss.
Oh yeah, that's going to be fun.
Yeah, we've got. So he's going to be addressing. He's only with us for an hour, so we're going to be addressing 3 topics. So the first is going to be answering Jewish objections to Jesus, and with that, I wanted to focus on sort of things like, does the Old Testament teach a Trinity, or is it consistent with a Trinity, and that sort of thing. The second topic is one that we haven't really covered, and that's sexuality. What is God's purpose for sexuality? Is homosexuality actually a sin, biblically speaking, and that sort of thing? And David's going to be going back and forth with him on that.
Oh, welcome to my lair, Michael Brown.
Yeah, well, he's a great guy, so he'll do. He's very biblically focused, but also he presents the side that I struggle with, the loving side. So. Yeah, I think that'll. And the third topic is also charismatic gifts, spiritual healings, and that sort of thing. David wanted to talk to him about that. So, yeah.
Oh, I can't wait. Can't wait.
Excellent. So yeah, the other last announcement we have is about the comment policy. So David and I have worked out some policies for you guys. And we'll write up. Should we go over it in audio, or do you just want to write it up?
Well, let's just write it up.
Gotcha.
I will say this. Dale and I have been hashing out comment policies on the board. And by the way, we love you, commenters. Well, I love you, commenters.
I love some of you. I like some of you.
Dale speak for himself. Dale hates your guts. I love you, commenters. And
I wouldn't say that.
The thing is, we want to make a good, safe-ish environment for everybody, because the idea is to encourage more, not less comments. I'm not, we're not looking for everybody to be nice to each other. This is not Disney. But at the same time, there are some things that I think each side can bend a little on and kind of help each other out as we figure out how to be a community. And so we'll talk more about that in writing, and I think that I think the comment section on SNS will be a better place for everybody.
Perfect. Okay. So yeah, as far as I can tell, that covers everything announcements wise. Unless David has something he wants to announce.
Okay. I'll just go ahead and say it.
Okay.
Since I teased it. So one of the guests that's going to come on this season, we have an agreement in principle. We almost had him on last year. It was going to be our last show, but then timing didn't work out. And so it's just a matter of working out timing this year, but he's busy, so I don't actually mind if some of you do a write-in campaign and harass him a little bit. He can take it. Justin Brierley is going to step into my lair as well and have some conversation. We'll talk about the subject as we get closer to the time, as we nail it down. But I'm looking forward to that conversation. It'll actually be very good. Justin Brierley is a great person to talk to. Great interview. I enjoyed listening to him on other interviews, and I think that ours will be a little bit different. But I'm just going to pre-announce that now. So if you write into Justin and say, "Hey, I hear you're thinking about going on Skeptics and Seekers," when you have a date. He can take it. It'll be okay. You're not going to scare him off.
Excellent. All right. Let's get straight into the topic. This is your week. One thing so we've changed in season 2 to make it clear for the audience in order to stop this perception that me and David are talking past each other. At the top of the blogs and in the podcast, right at the beginning, we're going to say what our claims are, if there are any. Again, it's optional for us if one or both want to make a claim on a given week and therefore bear the burden of proof. We can make any statements of beliefs, as well as any presuppositions, things that our claims are founded on, but they're not up for debate in the topic. Or we can just do nothing and just have a show where we're just talking. It's up to whatever me and David want to do on a given week. But if there are claims, such as this week, you'll see that right at the top. It'll be stated clearly for you guys, and in the podcast we'll mention right away if we're making any claims or anything like that. So you can bear that in mind as you listen to the show and see if we meet our burden of proof or not.
Yeah, and for me, most weeks, my position is, this is why I don't believe a certain thing, or this is why I feel the way I do about a certain thing. It's not a truth claim. It's more of an explanation.
So it's a statement
where
of belief.
My head is. Right?
Statement of belief or opinion is what I've been labeled.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
So that's different from a claim. However, this week I am making a claim.
Woohoo.
So I'm stepping out there, and in fact, I'm stepping out there in an area that I've not heard anyone else do. And so I hope I do okay. It's a new argument for me. I've been working on it for a little while. Today, I am going to talk about the myth of orthodoxy, and my claim is that there is no such thing as Christian orthodoxy. Not only is there no such thing as Christian orthodoxy, almost by definition, and by many agreed upon facts of the Christian church, there can't be any such thing as Christian orthodoxy. Now, this runs counter to intuition. I get that. In fact, for a while, it ran counter to my intuition, and as part of my struggle when I was a Christian, and even after I was a Christian, trying to figure out what on earth Christian orthodoxy is. Because I was a part of a denomination that was that presented, let's say, minority review, minority opinion on Christianity. We were a small denomination, and outside, and I've been a leader in 3 different denominations. I can tell you they're all different, and they're different enough in ways so that they don't worship together, and not all of them were small. And outside of Christianity, I've had reason to want to know what orthodoxy was as well, because I'm talking to Christians and debating with Christians all the time. You listen to season 1 of this show. We've had a lot of very prominent Christians on the show who have agreed to put time into having discussions and or debates with me and or Dale. It is very important for me to try to figure out what Christianity I'm debating from week to week, because it seems like everyone is different. I've got to retool for a different Christianity. And you see me on the discussion boards, not just SNS, you see me on the Unbelievable discussion boards. And every week it seems like I'm debating a different Christianity because someone else comes along and they have a different idea. So what is the Orthodox view? What is the Orthodox view? How do you figure it out? And I've been beating my head against that wall for a while, and that's partly what encouraged me to start moving in the direction that I'm going to be presenting right now, which is, I think the reason I'm having such a problem with this is that there is no Christian orthodoxy. And so here, I will just go into making my case, and I'm going to encourage you all, as I did all last year, if you have not read the blog post, go ahead and pause right now and read the blog post. I'll wait. Because the foundation of my argument is in the blog post. And it could be that Dale wants to bring out some points that are in the blog post. He also wrote a counter post. But I'm not going to be reading my blog post here. He's not going to be reading his counter post. So I recommend that you read the blog post so that you can understand the foundation on which all of the rest of this is built. So if you're done reading now, you're back. Here we go. So first of all, I think this is a definitional argument. So we've got to start by defining what orthodoxy is. And before I jump into it, I'm just going to go off script for a moment and ask you, Dale, because I'm curious, and I haven't asked you this throughout this whole process. What does orthodoxy mean to you when you hear that word? What does that mean?
So sure. So it basically it comes from the Greek. It was invented to mean straight thinking or right opinion. So that's literally what the definition means. So yeah, it basically represents what is the right way of thinking within a Christian context to be considered a Christian or a true Christian, meeting the essential requirements for being defined by that term.
Okay, so yes, that is a definition that I have also used in the past. I think it's a little too generic, though. And what I mean by that, I'm not saying that the dictionary is wrong. I'm saying that language is idiomatic, and it has more to do with how we use words than what words meant by someone who wrote a dictionary.
Okay.
They definitions grow and change over time, and so I think definitionally, it's really all about the way we use orthodoxy. And so I'm going to go over some points that illustrate what I think orthodoxy means, and we'll see if Dale and I meet up somewhere near the end of this. So let me take a few moments to pay this out some. So first of all, orthodoxy must be intentional and original, not a collection of successive advancements. In other words, to say that something is the orthodox view, it has to be the intention of the original founder. It can't be something that's made up as you go along. So I think that is one of the clear distinctions that has to be there if we're talking about orthodox, right? When I listen to Christians debate, I often hear Christians bring up a contemporary view, something that's fairly new. And I think to myself, well, that may be the right view. I mean, as far as what Christians should think, but it's definitely not the orthodox view, because that's not what the apostles were thinking. If we can judge what they were thinking by what's written. So you can't have something that you make up as you go, and then say that some new thing that you made up is orthodox. I contend that the Christian religion, from its very beginning, was something that was made up as it went along. It was not, in fact, something well thought out in advance, set down with laws and bylaws, and where orthodoxy was predetermined in some way. It's something that just kind of grew, became organic, had a lot of branches, disputes. Eventually it was, pruned and shaped a little bit, but by and large, it's made up as we went along. And so it's hard to identify anything in Christianity that you can say, well, that was the original thought. Orthodoxy, don't worry, Dale, we'll come back and let you.
Oh no, go. It's your.
Something. So I'm just taking some time to.
That's fine. It's your opening. Take as long as you need.
So, orthodoxy must be captured in a permanent form to be considered orthodoxy. I understand that many Christians talk about the Christian religion as an oral tradition. And if you've heard me talk, about historical matters, you will understand that I don't have a lot of respect for oral traditions. I get it. In a pre-writing civilization, oral tradition is all you've got. But that is not the stuff of orthodoxy. And so it's really hard for any ancient religion to claim orthodoxy when its beginnings, if there were any orthodox rules or laws, were never actually written down, or were only written down decades after the fact. So you can't actually go back to any source and say, well, this was the original intent of the founders, because you don't have it. What you have is a later writing of oral traditions that are pulled together. And I would say that you can't really draw orthodoxy from that. Third point, there must be a way to determine who's right when adherents to a religion disagree. So part of what is required for orthodoxy, I think, is a dispute method. If two people disagree on something, this is the written law that you can go to, or these are the authorities that are authorized to settle, doctrinal disputes, or, there has to be something that allows for settlement of disputes, so that we can know after that dispute which side, if either, is the orthodox view. Christianity does not have that mechanism built into it. Christianity has a mechanism of consensus, negotiation almost. So an example of this would be the Jerusalem Council in, I want to say, Acts 15. Am I right about Acts 15? That may not be right.
No, that's correct. Yes.
Okay, so where were the deal was with the Jerusalem Council? I can't be bothered to look it up right now. But so that wasn't determined by taking a book or a written bylaw or even a quote from Jesus saying this is what he said on this. It was a negotiation, and that's not the stuff of orthodoxy. So that's kind of an example of making it up as you go along. There must be a reliable way to reproduce the religion. So in Orthodoxy, I'm talking about religion in particular. There has to be a reliable way to reproduce the religion in a different time and a different place. And so if you say there's an Orthodox Christianity, then you have to be able to say, okay, so if we travel to outer space, 3,000 years later, and land on another planet, we could reproduce original Christianity. I don't think that's possible. And I think the proof that that's not possible is because we haven't done it. We've reproduced all kinds of religions with the label of Christianity, but they're all different. And they all claim to be Orthodox. And so I don't think there is, in fact, a reliable way. One of the things that my denomination used to claim is that we were the exact reproduction of the first century church, which was BS. We were not the exact reproduction of the first century church, but that was the idea behind it. That the church was reproducible, that the Bible was a blueprint, the New Testament, it was a blueprint to church making. I think that the evidence is in that it's not. They might argue otherwise. My next point: there must be agreement among Orthodox adherents as to what is and isn't Orthodox. So, if you've got a collection of Christians in a room and if there is an Orthodox view, say on homosexuality, they should all be able to agree on what that is. But if they do not, then it is evidence that there may not, in fact, be an Orthodox view. One side can't just arbitrarily say, well, our view is Orthodox. There has to be a way to form that agreement. And once again, just looking at the evidence of the state of Christianity, there doesn't seem to be such a method. So once again, I don't see how anyone can claim orthodoxy. Next point, there has to be accountability for straying outside of orthodoxy. Now, churches have tried this. Some try shunning. Some do, disfellowshipping, or a church might secede from its denomination and go independent. All of these things, though, just produce division. So if you've got one church and there's disagreement there and they break off into two churches, you just have now two claims of orthodoxy. You haven't actually established any orthodoxy. If you kick someone out and they form another church, once again, you haven't really effectively addressed this heresy idea. You just created another idea of what orthodoxy is. And so built into its structure, there has to be some kind of accountability for what it means to stray outside of orthodoxy. And I don't think the church has demonstrated any reliable method for pruning itself and keeping itself pure so that you can say, so this is the church and everyone who doesn't believe this is a heretic. I think there have been efforts, but largely unsuccessful. And finally, Orthodox must be accessible to all, not just insiders. What I mean by this is it can't just be a private revelation between you and God. Because then, if Christians are talking to unbelievers, and the unbeliever says, yes, but I read this in your Bible, blah, the Christian falls back on, yeah, but you don't know what you're talking about because you're over there and I'm in here. You're an outsider. But that's not actually how orthodoxy works. It has to be a set of rules available and identifiable by everyone, insiders and outsiders. No, here are the rules. The rule is blank is a sin. And you can't say, well, I don't know what I'm talking about because I'm not a Christian. If I'm looking at your rule book, if it's not discernible that way, then I don't think that you have anything that looks like orthodoxy in any other setting at the very least. And also it has to be, once again, it has to be something that everybody within the institution can recognize as orthodox. And the reality is That's not the case. Christians might agree on very few things, but on the many things they can't, and they can't even agree on what is historic, let alone orthodox. So before moving on to other points, I'm just gonna stop there. Definitionally, these are the points that I've put together to try to understand what orthodoxy is, what it would mean. And by the way, I do believe that there are religions that have orthodoxy, right? So I'm not saying that there's no such thing as orthodoxy. As I define orthodoxy, I believe that there is very much a such thing as orthodoxy. I think that many religions have it. I don't think that Christianity is one of it. That, in a nutshell, is my case, Bill.
Okay, so just to clarify for the audience, so this week I'm opting not to make any claims. I'm solely in the position of defender here, and I'm gonna first adopt not a Christian position, but I'm gonna be Dale the Seeker. And I've composed some questions for David and these are sincere questions. They're not designed to be gotcha questions. They're designed to see, okay, can David establish his claim or not, and what goes behind it. Now he's actually, I've written these up based on an assumption that, based on his blog, that his main reason for saying that there is no real orthodoxy or real Christianity is because well, he has his method of, well, there are if you're a self-professing Christian, then you are quote unquote a real Christian, and you can be taken at face value as to what real Christianity constitutes. Well, there are many real Christians in the world, and they contradict each other. Therefore, there's no real Christianity, because it violates the logical law of non-contradiction. Now, in David's opening speech, he actually provided additional reasons beyond just that one method. So I'm going to have to act on the fly to address those as well. But in the first place, let's take this one issue that I was prepared for, that anyone who self-professes to be a Christian is a real Christian. Therefore, what they say constitutes real Christianity is valid. So I wanted to just sort of ask, is this one of the ways that you think is a valid way for determining what real Christianity is or isn't, David?
I don't know. So I've been trying to think about how I would answer that, and now that the moment is upon me, I'm not sure how to answer it. Here's how I would refine it. I would say that whether or not the one professing to be a Christian is a real Christian or not is not interesting to me. I have no way of knowing whether that person is a real Christian or not. What I can say is the only criteria I have to evaluate whether a person is a Christian or not is by whether they say they are or not. So that's slightly and subtly different from they are a real Christian. It's just me saying that's the only way I can determine whether they are or not. If there are other ways of determining it, they're not accessible to me.
Okay, but your intro blog has provided some means, whether successful or not, to do that. But
well,
okay,
but
so
I say that Christianity doesn't have orthodoxy in the way that Christians think they do, and so there is no orthodox Christianity. So I cannot, in fact, take a person's claims and look at their life and do any methods and say, well, that doesn't match up with Orthodox Christianity. I don't have an Orthodox Christianity to match it up to.
Okay, so then what is the relationship between a real Christian, given your thing, and their relationship, their claims as to what real Christianity is? Then can someone be a real Christian according to the best of your lights, just assuming that they're true? What's the relationship towards proving that there is that their claims as to what real Christianity is or is not What's the validity of that? Could they be wrong, even if they're real Christians? Or
Sure, I suppose they could be, but I mean, the real question for me then would be who gets to judge whether they're real Christian or not. Um, I don't get to judge that. I don't have access to the tools that would allow me to judge that. So the only thing I can know is, well, that person said they're a real Christian. I can't prove that they're not a real Christian. And so I have to proceed as if they're a Christian.
but why would you have to proceed that way? Because so one of the former questions I had is, we know that people get self-deluded or that people lie at times.
But I don't have access to whether they're self-deluded or whether they're lying.
So wouldn't the prudent position to hold would be agnosticism then? You wouldn't want to assume, okay, well, I can't tell if you're a real Christian or not, therefore I assume you are a real Christian, and I can use the doctrines that you give me to disprove that there is a real Christianity. We wouldn't be able to do that if you have no way of knowing. That's sort of my.
But I don't think we can do that, and I don't think we do have a way of knowing. But the reason I would assume their claim as opposed to neutrality is that I am a big proponent of self-identification and respecting people's self-report. And so I know that this is a problem with Christians today when they come and issue transgender issues. Christians insist on calling a person a he or a she based on the gender, based on the gross sexual physical traits that person was born with, as if that Christian knows what genitalia that person was born with. But if a person says I'm a she, and the Christian thinks no, I think you're a man, the Christian has a problem with respecting using the she pronouns, the feminine pronouns, and I do not have a problem with that. And so I believe in respecting a person's self-report. I don't have any reason to say you are not what you say you are. And if I don't have a reason to say that you're not what you say you are, I will just respect that you are what you say you are, at least from as far as my interaction with you, until I have a reason to think that is not true. And even if I suspect it's not true, that's still not reason enough to disrespect your self-report. So let's use something that is very identifiable. Let's say a person says that they are a Mason. Okay, well, I don't know if they're a Mason or not. They might be lying. But until I know that they're lying, I'm going to treat them like a Mason, however a Mason is supposed to be treated. Now, we can do some research and find out whether that person's a Mason or not. Right? There is, if I can use this word, orthodoxy to what a Mason is.
Really?
So you can figure it out.
Interesting.
And until you do, if a person says they're a Mason, and you don't have any way of disproving that, what you should say is, howdy, Mason. And that's how I treat Christians. If they say they're a Christian, I have no way of disproving that, so I'm going to treat them like a Christian.
Okay, but so that's maybe a practical reason. But if we're going to make a claim, a theoretical claim that there is no real Christianity, and that is based on the fact that I just take at face value people that claim to be real Christians and their ability to define what real Christianity is therefore valid. That's the way you would establish that there is no such thing as a real Christianity, and I just don't think that we can do that. The true position would be agnosticism. In the same way, if I self-identified as a scientist and hey, I'm a physicist, the Earth is 6,000 years old, the Earth is flat, that doesn't say anything as to disqualify the fact that no, that the Earth is spherical. The climate change is a real thing, and even if I claim to be a philosopher of science and I said there is no such thing as the scientific method or any scientific methodologies, they're all invalid. That wouldn't take away from the fact that there is a real science. So that this is what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to divorce this subjective state where you yourself admit that look, we can't know if someone is lying or deluded. Many people think they are real Christians, but might not be if there's an objective standard to compare it to. So that's do you recognize the point that I'm saying that you can't make a positive claim if you can't based on the claims of real Christians if you can't know if they're real Christians or not.
Well, yeah. So I'm
Sure.
not making a positive claim that they're Christians, though. That's why I say whether they're actually Christians or not is uninteresting to me.
Okay.
I have no way of knowing that. But whether the only piece of evidence that I have access to is what they say they are. Now, I suspect you're going to argue, no, but we have other evidences.
Correct. And as did you, by the way, in your opening speech, I think, if I've understood you correctly. So I'm going to get to that. I think you would say we do have an objective standard.
Well, actually, I'm saying we don't have an objective standard in the case of Christianity. So, yeah, if there was something called orthodoxy, then we would have an objective standard, perhaps. But because there isn't any Christian orthodoxy, we don't have an objective standard. And so one person's claim of being a real Christian, from my perspective, is just as good as another person's claim of being a real Christian.
Sure, I would agree. I would agree with that. Without an objective standard, they're just as good. But I'm just trying to hammer home that your claim doesn't follow based on it doesn't follow from just using a practical. We have a practical reason to just take people at their word. If you're going to prove there's no Christianity because real Christians adopt contradictory positions, you would have to establish that the two people advancing the contradictory propositions are in fact real Christians. And that was really the fundamental point that I wanted to get across.
Right, but that's not really the point that I made, though, in my introduction. So I spent time explaining why I don't think, what I think orthodoxy is, and I gave some examples of why I don't think Christianity fits that bill.
Yeah, you did. And I'm going to get to that next.
I think that maybe a good place to go would be for you to tell me where you think I'm wrong.
Yeah, so great. So we would agree that method solely does not establish the claim. But you do have other things. So, for example, there is an objective standard. In order for someone to be a real Christian and representing orthodoxy, it must be intentional and original. So, in terms of intentionality, intentional by whom? Maybe it's intended by God, the orthodoxy that we have, even if it's not intended by any person. Wouldn't God's intentions count for fulfilling this criterion?
Well, you have to pretend to know God's intentions. So I don't presume to know that, and I know a lot of Christians do presume to know that because they presume to speak for God. But when I'm just reading the New Testament and I look at the character of Jesus and the things that he was meant to have said and did, I have to ask myself, is this the behavior in speeches of a person who is intentionally trying to establish an institutional church? And the answer I keep coming up with is no, it is not.
Okay. And the next part of that same thing is it has to be original. This was something that you repeated a couple times, that it has to be what orthodoxy is defined as. It has to be all in the founder. There can't be any advancements or developments to that.
So can I refine that a little bit?
Sure,
Because
yeah.
even after I wrote that, I realized there was some room for refinement.
Okay.
So I still stand by that, but I would say that in Orthodox, if you'll allow me to talk about the U.S., the United States, as an institution.
Absolutely, yeah.
Just as an example.
Sure.
There was a constitution by the founders. And so we can get idea of original intent and things like that. But there was also built into that Constitution a way to amend it, a way to change and grow, if you will. And so I do recognize that later additions can be orthodox if it is a part of an orthodox method of growing that, changing that institution. So within the Constitution, within the founding of the country, there is a way to add to or amend orthodoxy.
Gotcha.
And in Christianity, there is not.
Well, see, okay, so yeah, that was my point is I think that there is they do allow for amendments or progressive revelation to come about. So, for example, yeah. So I got to phrase this as a question because I'm sincerely seeking. I'm not trying to get you or anything. So
It's okay.
well, okay,
I
so
don't mind being got.
no, but I don't want to do that. I want to take.
Come at me, bro.
No, I don't want to do that. I'm trying to make an illustrative point for the audience. I want to take your idea seriously and see if I can prove it correct or not. Okay, so if that's the case, what do you make of things like Jeremiah 31, which do speak of future developments, the in the end times, that the laws are not all of the Old Testament laws are olam, which is Hebrew for forever. Certainly in the New Testament, Paul sees this. He can't accept Christianity until he realizes, oh, he's risen from the dead. He truly is the Messiah. We're living in the Messianic era. Therefore, the old criticisms against it don't apply in this era. It's a different. We're in different circumstances, and the New Testament, the Old Testament anticipates this, and the New Testament affirms that there can be progression, and Jesus himself says that, look, I'm not giving you everything. I'm going to give the apostles the Holy Spirit to guide them into truth, for future developments in church history. So yeah, like my question is like, well, how do you address these things that are inbuilt in the Bible that do anticipate change?
Well, that's a fair question, but I don't take the Bible as a whole as you do. So you're treating the
Gotcha.
Bible as if it were a single document breathed from God, and so you're not actually thinking about what Jeremiah said. You're thinking about what God said through Jeremiah, and I don't see it that way. So I don't see Jeremiah, for instance, as an authority who can suggest that there will be change, that there will be change in the future. I see God himself as authority who says, I am the same today, yesterday, and forever. I see God as an authority that says this will be an eternal covenant, and so I don't actually recognize the progressive aspect of, well, some of these things are going to change. Just look at what this prophet said. In the same way, I don't recognize changes that Paul seemed to be making on the fly either. So I know that there's a place to talk about authority and who has the right to make these changes, but there was nothing in any original document that said, this is how change will happen, and these are the people who can do it, and so forth. This is just someone coming along thousands of years later saying, hey, things are going to change. That's not the same thing as having an inbuilt method of amending orthodoxy, similar to our Constitution.
Although I would say, just to get one little barb in as a joke, Paul did self-identify as a Christian, so therefore his opinion did matter to what real Christianity is. But we've covered that point.
Not
yeah.
just any Christian can make the
I
kinds
know,
of changes and pronouncements that Paul made. So
Gotcha. Fair point.
Just for the audience, Paul is probably going to be a subject of another one of my topics this year, and why I think Paul was an idiot. And why no one should listen to him.
Okay.
So,
okay.
But yeah, I think that before you can point to, well, this passage here says this, I mean, that passage didn't exist when Genesis was written. That passage didn't exist for the hundreds, possibly thousands of years, people were reading the Pentateuch. And so who died and said Jeremiah could come along and change things?
Gotcha. And okay, so yeah, that's a fair point, and we're gonna get into the Bible because at some point I am gonna put on my Christian hat and say what I said in the blog, where I think, yeah, it's a question who says about the Bible being united and all of that. I'm just a seeker. Okay, fair point. But I okay, so how do you make you're making the claim here, and you're saying that orthodoxy must be original. It must be all contained in the original founder.
Yes.
How do you make that claim? Like why couldn't it be? Maybe I can't prove that the Bible is a united whole and that Jeremiah is a prophet in a progressive stream of revelation. But how do you prove that it's not that that's not the case? That it has to go back, whoever the writer of Genesis was, pretending that was the first book chronologically written.
Which it wasn't.
Which it wasn't, right? But let's pretend it was. Why does how do you know that the guy who wrote Genesis has to say everything? Yeah, talks about Jesus, the resurrection. Why does he have to say everything?
I think if you're going to say this is the foundation of a religion or an institution, if I can use that word a little bit more broadly, this is the foundation of an institution, then you have to sketch out the institution. I mean, otherwise, there's no, that idea has no meaning at all. I don't. We can talk about an institution that kind of organically happens over time, but then you don't get to talk about orthodoxy, right? So I'm not saying that every institution has orthodoxy, but every orthodoxy started off intentionally. And once again, it's one of the reasons why I say there are religions that definitely fall in the category of having orthodoxy. Christianity just isn't one of them.
Okay, that the way you phrase that is a very interesting point. So, okay, in the first place, though, you would agree the foundations, their very inherent nature, don't include everything. I mean, buildings are built on top of foundations. The foundation isn't the building. So,
Right, but the blueprint is. So the architect's drawing is in fact orthodoxy, um, and that includes the foundations and the structures and the support places, the closets. And it doesn't mean that the building is going to go up exactly the way the blueprint is. You may run into problems along the way. And in that case, you have to make some changes. But you can't call those changes orthodoxy. Those changes were things that you had to do along the way. You might have to make more changes even after the building was built. But the Christian claim of orthodoxy is not some practical claim. It's actually an impractical claim. It's the claim that we are doing and saying the right things because this is how God intended it to be from the start. That is the whole reason for claiming that you have the orthodox view. And so, definitionally, that is what the Christian is saying, that this was the original intent. And I am saying that's batshit crazy because you have no idea what the original intent is. And if you're not hearkening back to the original intent, then shut up about orthodoxy. And if it was allowed to change somewhere along the line to fit what you're now thinking is the right way of thinking, then it's allowed to change later. So someone can come along and say, okay, yeah, maybe it wasn't originally intended to allow homosexuals, but now it is. Who are you to say to shut the door on orthodoxy, to shut the door on the changes that you like? If it's a progressive revelation, it can keep progressing.
gotcha. Okay. Okay, so I think I've got two more things to go as a seeker here.
Okay.
And I can do more if you think I missed something that's really important to probe you on as a seeker. Okay, so here's one thing that we were discussing pre-show, and you bring it up in your last response about orthodoxy is the institution. And you and I fundamentally disagree on that. When I think of real Christianity or orthodoxy, I'm thinking set of propositions or beliefs or doctrines, as well as practices that may be included in a sect called the Real Christianity sect. You don't think that way. You think more a real Christian or a real Christianity is constituted by a physical, concrete institution of some sort. Um, in the first place, did you want to sort of just highlight what? Okay, well, what is the difference, and why do you prefer looking at orthodoxy as an institution as opposed to what seems to be the case in the New Testament, a set of beliefs? You have to believe that Jesus is X, Y, and Z, and you have to be willing to obey and repent and that sort of thing. Why do you prefer this institutional definition as the proper one for orthodoxy?
Okay. I'm going to jump in my notes to my last point. We might swing back around and examine this more fully.
Okay.
But I think the question kind of demands that I pick that out right now.
Okay.
So if you look in the point, it's not actually my last point, my point 3 in the addendum that I gave you.
Mm-hmm.
I talk about different kinds of or competing orthodoxies. So let me just go over that a little bit.
Sure.
As a foundation of my answer. So I write that Catholic orthodoxy is not the same as Christian orthodoxy. What I mean by that, I'm not saying that Catholics aren't Christians. I'm saying the institution of the Catholic Church does not constitute the Christian religion. Do you understand the distinction there?
So say that again. Sorry.
The institution of the Catholic Church does not constitute the Christian religion.
Okay. Yeah.
It is a self-contained institution within Christendom. And Catholicism definitely has orthodoxy. I think we could make the case, at least for a lot of elements of Catholicism, qualifying as, Orthodox Catholic teaching. We can. It's not oxymoronic to talk about Orthodox Catholic teaching, but that competes with the broader sense of Christian orthodoxy in many characteristics, and your understanding of what is correct doctrine. So you talked about the set of propositional truths. Well, every Christian, every individual Christian has a unique set of propositional truths. I think that we could find that unique set. In fact, I've done this experiment a few times in congregations. If you get a room full of Christians to write out 10 things that they think are fundamental to the Christian faith, top 10, it's a different list with everybody. And if you get conversations going, everybody will disagree with some point in someone else's list. No two people are going to agree. That's just limiting it to 10. If you stretched it out to 100 propositional truths, the Christianities would look very different. And so when you talk about propositional truths individually, everyone has their own sense of what is and isn't orthodox. But those competing orthodoxies individually do not constitute what is actually orthodox within a religion. That just constitutes your list of what you think is important. And so, never mind my last point there. Just to kind of swing back around to your question, why am I focused on institutions? Because I think that's the only way we can talk about orthodoxy in a meaningful way. Otherwise, we're just talking about individual lists that are competing and incompatible. And that way, no one is in a better position than anyone else to claim orthodoxy. In fact, when people talk about orthodoxy, they're not just saying, I'm right, as opposed to you being right. They're saying that I am in line with the original teachings and intent of Jesus. That's what they're trying to say. And so likewise, a denomination, I'm going to call the Catholic Church a denomination. I know that might offend them, but a denomination can't claim orthodoxy either, as in, the way my denomination did when I grew up. They would have said, yeah, we're the Orthodox Church. No, you're not. Even if you were right about 9 out of 10 things, that doesn't make you Orthodox. You don't define orthodoxy. And so the only way to really talk about orthodoxy is in the grand scheme of an institution. It seems like everything else is just kind of a cheat to get around that.
Okay. So I'll just give a bit of my thing here before I ask the next question. So I actually disagree. I agree with David. So I'm speaking as Dale the Christian here, just temporarily. I actually agree with David that there is the church manifests itself in concrete institutions. However, I think that real Christianity, there's the universal, invisible church, and that's what the Bible speaks of when it talks about the church or members of the body of Christ. And this individual members are members of this universal church in light of subscribing to certain essential doctrines of Christianity proper, and any practices, anything that constitutes Christianity proper. So the physical institutions are very downplayed for my point of view. I don't think they're as important, and especially in the early church. I mean, institutions along the lines that David was talking about didn't really come along until the 2nd century. That's when it started really getting formalized. Late 1st century, early 2nd century is when we start getting together around these formal institutions, whereas I think before that it was a lot more decentralized, and the concept of real Christianity, the essential doctrines of Christianity proper, are what united the church. Whether you're in Corinth or Jerusalem or Ephesus, it didn't matter. Obviously this universal, invisible church manifested in visible local churches. So these are the technical terms. And how you organize that, and that wasn't as important. It was more about the essential doctrines and living a good Christian life and that sort of thing. But putting back on my seeker hat, because it's about this is David's claim, so it's about probing that. So in the first place, you would you agree that if Christianity is institutional, real Christianity is institutional, would that mean anyone outside? So let's say that's the Catholic Church for the sake of argument. Would that mean it would be impossible for anyone outside the Catholic Church to be a real Christian?
Well, so let me answer your question with a question, and then I'll swing back and answer it with an answer.
Sure.
If Judaism was institutional, would that mean that someone not circumcised as a Jew, does that mean they weren't a real Jew? I'll answer that for you. Yes, they were not a real Jew. So there were boundaries to what it meant to be a Jew. It wasn't this ethereal, uncertain, kind of mystical thing. It was a very institutional thing. And Christianity followed closely behind Judaism in this way. So I don't think it's all that different in that sense. So institutionally, I mean, you could say, well, there's the church, the invisible universal church, but there's always been kind of a debate in church as to, so do you need to be a part of an institution to be a part of the church? And for most of my life, the answer has been yes to that question, because God didn't just create a universal, ethereal, invisible church. He instantiated that with institutions. And so you can't just take the mystical part of it without the physical part of it.
Correct. Out of necessity to operate on a human level, there does need to be that visible local church, that and Catholics would say a visible universal church, obviously, but there does need to be that visible manifestation in order for it on a practical level. But that's not that's not what it means. That's not what the Bible is speaking of when it speaks of the body of Christ, or being an official member. I think that your institutional view. Sorry, yeah, I'm not the Christian yet. Oh,
That's fine though. I think it's useful to hash this out because this is an important distinction. Um,
yeah,
I think it is important. I don't think you can separate it the way a lot of Christians try to separate it. It's a little bit like, when I was a Christian, I believed in duality, body and in spirit, physical and spirit. And when the Bible talked about one, it wasn't excluding the other. You can't be spiritually pure and also an adulterer. You can't join your body with prostitutes and your spirit with God.
right. Yeah,
They go together. And so, in the same way, the church, you can say, well, it has a spiritual component, but it is a physical entity.
right. But it's a there was the interconnectivity of the early church. It was beyond just the little physical institutions. That we are united internationally in the early church, for example, and all true Christians, if there is an objective standard of what constitutes real Christianity, then that transcends the fact that I'm at a Baptist church or at a whatever denominational church or that sort of thing. So that there's a set of requirements, and if you meet that, then that transcends the the need for the particular physical manifestation.
Once again, my particular this is not a debate that we will settle today, but my particular flavor of Christianity would have disagreed with that.
Yeah, and I'll say
So
my own church agrees with you. By the way, they you need to be a member of a local church, because that's the same meaning for church in the Greek, comes from the root
yeah,
synagogue, an assembly. It's a
assembly, right?
visible assembly.
Ecclesia.
Yeah, ecclesia. That's it. Yeah. Okay, perfect. But that's fine. I disagree.
And so and just to add a little bit of color to that, one of the reasons it has to be that way, by those of us who think that that's what the Bible was getting at, is that's where the other parts of the organization are. That's how you attain the spiritual blessings, is through the physical church. If you're not in a right
Oh,
physical church with a right relationship, you're not going to receive any spiritual blessings.
right, and it's
So
mandatory to take part
right,
in communion or something, right? So
right, you don't get the benefits of communion by taking it by yourself on an island.
exactly, yeah. I would agree 100% with that. That the physical manifestation part is necessary, but being a for the purposes of
Well,
self.
but if you're part of an apostate church, that would be the same. That would be a similar problem. And so it absolutely does matter what kind of institution you've attached yourself to. Because if you're part of an apostate institution, you just as well be a Satanist calling yourself a Christian.
I don't think so. I think if you're like an individual Catholic or something in a Protestant, if you believe Catholicism or something, and you're at a Baptist church, as long as you meet the essential requirements for being a Christian, that transcends. It doesn't matter which church you're
But you,
sitting in.
you understand that there are a number of Baptists, probably some even in your church, who would disagree with that. They
Yes.
think of the Catholic Church as a great Satan, and if you are
Yes.
in that church, no matter what minimal requirements you met, you are in fact in an apostate church that is opposed to God, and it's not enough to simply say, "Well, you're part of the Church Universal."
Gotcha. Yep, and you're absolutely right. They would say that. So that leads to my next question. It's based on what you said. Remember, you said, if you sat down 10 Christians, and they wrote down 10 doctrines. None of them would agree. Um, okay, so why?
So it's never happened in my experience anyway.
Okay, so why 10 though? Why not three? Maybe if you had three doctrines,
I've
then
done
they would
five.
agree. You've done five, and none of them
Yes.
agreed.
No.
Um, okay, and obviously there are reasons for that. What are they thinking? I bet you I could find five doctrines that all Christian. If I wrote down five doctrines and said, "Do you guys agree with these?" I could find five where, at the very least, the vast majority of people, self-professing Christians, would say, "Yep, I concur with that." So I could.
If you use the resources of the internet, you can find 100 people who will agree with that. But if you're talking about the resources of a local church, these are the 40 people that came to Bible class this morning. Um, it's hard to find that.
Right, but that would, it depends what you mean. That would be their fault, possibly, right? Because I don't know what you, like, if I said everyone agrees that First Corinthians is a divinely inspired book, I bet you all Christians, or the vast majority of self-professing Christians, would be saying, yeah, that's something
Yes,
we
I
can.
think so. But but most of them wouldn't have that on their list of essentials. But
Oh,
yeah,
okay, yeah, yeah, that's true.
if you kind of throw that in, they would say, yeah, I think that's true.
Gotcha. So, okay, so I guess it comes down to how do we determine what the essentials are or aren't. And we've already established that the main way of just taking people, self-professing Christians, at their word as to what those essentials are is not good enough. There could be any number of reasons as to why there's disagreement, beyond even the ones I mentioned, them lying, or deluded. There could be any number of reasons as to why they're wrong as to what the essentials are. So I think that we do need some kind of objective standard to come up. Oh, okay. Last question. You also claimed that there needs to be a degree of permanence, um,
Yes.
and I took that to mean, or you sort of downgraded oral tradition, and I take it to mean it has to be in writing, in some form.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. When you say downgraded oral tradition, you're not stating it strongly enough. I despise oral tradition, and I just don't think much of it as any kind of way to do reliable history on things that matter a lot. So I understand that oral tradition is all we have for a lot of history. Right? So I get that, but I don't base my life on what I think someone may have said that's been passed down through oral tradition.
Okay. But if the claim is that orthodoxy doesn't exist because in the early church it wasn't written, at least until a couple decades after, I think 49 AD is our first writing. Certainly,
Yeah.
Jesus, that we know of, Jesus didn't write anything himself, and he's the founder.
Yeah,
So,
whatever he supposedly wrote in the dirt, in the case of the adulterous woman, and in a story that didn't actually happen. Yeah, that's the only writing we have of Jesus.
gotcha. So how do you prove? I don't believe this criterion. How do you establish that it has to be in writing in order for it to count as orthodox? Certainly, there could be
Well,
orthodox. It might not be useful for us, the oral tradition today, but who cares? Orthodoxy. He was still teaching orthodoxy orally to people then and there, and then
okay, so I don't mind making that concession
okay,
that someone could be passing along correct orthodoxy through oral tradition. My main point is that we don't have access to it today. So you can speculate that oral tradition carried some form of orthodoxy, but you can't test it against anything, and you can't trust it to have remained pure over time. So there's no way for you to go back and work against to find the what was originally said by anyone in a reliable enough way to claim that one opinion is orthodox versus another.
Gotcha.
because there were lots of oral traditions. So
Gotcha.
um,
Okay.
you don't have any way of sorting that out.
For us today, sure. As a seeker, happy to say okay. But still, in terms of the claim that you're conceding, there was orthodoxy could take the form of oral tradition, but it's only good for those people back then. It's
Yeah, I,
okay. Cool.
I, I concede that.
Okay. Cool.
It's certainly possible to transmit for a short period of time over a short distance.
Gotcha. Perfect. Okay, so I think that's it in terms of Dale being a seeker here. Unless is there anything that you think that's important that I missed on probing you about? As I said, I wasn't trying to be challenging. I hope I've
Yeah.
come across as trying to help you spell out what is your case for the audience.
Right. No,
Gotcha.
I think that fleshes my ideas out, and it at least gives a listener an understanding of why I think Christianity does not qualify as orthodox, or why claims of orthodoxy don't apply to Christianity. Now, it's there's plenty of room for people to disagree, but I just wanted to lay out my case.
Yeah.
And if you want to directly attack some of that, feel free, or I will be glad to lay out the next plank of my case.
Oh, so there's more to it then.
Well, so yeah, so there's some discussion, some things that I can flesh out. So that is the foundation of my case. But so let me just go to point number 2 in my notes,
Okay.
and this will give you a little bit more to work with, I think. So I think one of the reasons for me, anyway, why it took me so long to come to this conclusion on orthodoxy is because I was conflating a lot of things with orthodoxy. And I think that is the mistake that maybe even some listeners are making now. And so let me just flesh that out a little bit by saying what orthodoxy is and what orthodoxy is not. So what orthodoxy is, in short, the bumper sticker for orthodoxy is it is that which was intended. Okay, so if the reason Christians make the claim that mine is the orthodox view is that they're trying to say their opinion is more right than yours because it's what was originally intended. So let's just set that aside. I think that what people get confused with are other things. For instance, mainstream is not orthodoxy. Mainstream is just what's popular. What's popular has nothing to do with what was intended. So we can really throw that out, and a lot of people get very confused about a mainstream doctrine. I don't care what the mainstream doctrine is, and I think that you're the same way. If I'm not mistaken, that you don't actually care what the mainstream doctrine is. You care what the correct doctrine is.
The only caveat I would say is number one, you would have to care what the mainstream is if you're taking this self-professing Christianity is the means, but you're right, absolutely. The mainstream is not necessarily the same as Orthodox. 100 years from now, we could all we could all be Jehovah's Witnesses. We are not Orthodox Christians, even if 99% of people who say they're Christians think so. But the mainstream
Right.
could be. I guess it's no. Okay, so forget about the mainstream then. Yeah, on your next point, I'll make a.
Yeah. So the next point is a little bit more fine, I think. It's the traditional or historic view. This is often conflated with orthodoxy too. So we confuse what is old with what is orthodox. Now I agree that orthodoxy needs to be old, but old gets you close. It doesn't get you orthodox. There's a difference between old and original. So, for instance, the Catholic Church, I think, is old, right? I think it's got some of the oldest traditions, but I don't think that many of their views are anything like what was originally intended by anybody. But they are old and historic, and so when people start talking about the historic Christian faith, I feel much the same way about that as I do the mainstream Christian faith. Yeah, okay, it's historic. It's old, but it's not original. And it's not what was necessarily intended. And so I'm not entirely sure that I care what people in the 3rd century thought about like 1st century religion.
Yeah, my only qualifier to that is I do think that you're technically correct, but I use tradition and historical tradition and that sort of thing as an indicator. It might be suggestive. If so, for example, one of the reasons I think when I get into my Christian case after you're done with this, I think the Bible is divine revelation. That this, and one of the reasons I think the Bible is sufficiently attached is because it's the traditional or historic position of the church. So I think it can be used as an indicator and evidence if it's attached to some kind of theological argument that brings that fact significance. But in and of itself, you're correct. Just because it's a traditional or historic perspective doesn't mean it's orthodox or correct necessarily.
Okay, so challenging, making it a little bit more challenging, what is practical is often conflated with what is orthodox. And so an example of practical utilitarian versus orthodox would be what is the age of the earth? Well, the practical Christian says it's 4.7 billion years. Let's be serious. However, the original view, as laid out in the Bible, is some age much younger. And so you can say, well, but this practical view is right, and therefore it must be what the authors meant. But you're reading back into a thing, and you're using your practicality as a substitute for orthodox, and that doesn't work. That's not true orthodoxy. And the same point, I think, even more challenging is the updated or corrected or contemporary view. You can use the same example that I gave, but I used homosexuality earlier. We can see something awful that the Bible said. Maybe slavery is a good time to insert slavery here. We can look at the Old Testament on slavery. We can look at the New Testament on slavery. Neither one of them frees the slaves or says that you shouldn't own slaves. And yet Christians today insist that the Bible teaches that you shouldn't own slaves. Well, what they have done is they've updated the material. And they've corrected it, in my opinion. The contemporary view is the better view. But it's not orthodox. And so it's another example of a way that we can read back something into the text and falsely claim orthodoxy where there was no orthodoxy there.
Gotcha. Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess I'm never going to get out of the seeker mode, but I actually do. I missed something that I felt was important that I jotted down here, and it's you made
Okay.
you made a point about private versus public. So orthodoxy has to be accessible to the skeptic, to the non-Christian or the non-insider. I wanted to probe on that. How do you know that? Because it seems to me certainly the Bible tells us that the essential truths of the gospel are just not accessible to the foolish. What's the you probably know the words in Romans why like it calls you guys
Yes.
darkened hearts and that sort of
Yeah, it uses a lot of ad hominem, hate speech, personal attacks. I know.
right. But the point is
We'll
just
talk Paul sometime. Don't worry.
aside from the ad hominem, the point is it's making the point that it's not accessible to outsiders. So how do you
Yeah.
prove that certainly Christians have the help of the Holy Spirit opening their eyes and that sort of thing? So how do you make the argument or the claim that orthodoxy has to be objectively known by people as opposed to being subjectively known? It seems perfectly
It's a
coherent.
fair question, but I think it's a misguided question. So I will acknowledge that on the surface it is a good question. Um, But here's the problem. We're talking about Christianity, and we're entering an area where special pleading is, I think, about to happen. And I want to steer us away from that, because if we're talking about any other institution, we wouldn't grant that they get some secret method of knowing their truth. So Christians debate Muslims all the time, and they do so on the basis of what the Quran says. The Muslim could simply say, well, yes, but you can't read the Quran properly because the Holy Spirit, or whatever the Muslim version of that, hasn't interpreted it to you correctly. But we think that we can read it properly. We think that if this is the Constitution that you're drawing from, your Constitution should be readable by everybody. I use the United States as kind of my stand-in example here. Other countries can look at our Constitution and know when we are violating our own laws, and they can call us on the carpet for that. It's not some secret private revelation, but the Christian wants to have a secret way so that nobody can call them on the carpet and hold them accountable when they're going offline, and say, yeah, well, but you can't understand it because you're an outsider, so it doesn't matter how much you read the book. I think Christians do say that, but I think that's a bogus argument.
And I'm just going to flip on Dale the Christian's hat for a second. I actually agree 100% with David. I disagree with Dale the Seeker, his question here. So it's a fair question for a seeker, but as a Christian, no. I think in order for you to be a real seeker, that at least the essential doctrines have to be understandable in order to assess, is this true or not? So it does have to be understandable to skeptics, or at least the mechanism for them to be able to understand it. They don't necessarily have to understand it in real life, and that would be through their own fault or that sort of thing. But God has to provide the means for them to know, if they're a real seeker, to find out what are the essential doctrines of Christianity proper, or real Christianity as David calls it, and be able to assess that. Is that true or not? So Dale the Christian agrees with David the Skeptic, on that one. So, yeah, good stuff.
Right. So take it away. Any dismantling of my argument? That's my case. There are other things that I could say, but I think it's a solid case at any rate. So tell me why I'm wrong.
Sure. So as Dale the Christian now, so here's why you're wrong. Because I think that God has provided us an objective means through which we can discern what is Christianity proper, what the essential doctrines are for Christianity, and this would constitute a true or real Christianity, and would help us discern who's in or out of that in light of those objective criteria.
And just so you know, if I agreed with that above statement that God had provided that, I would agree that my case is bogus and you win. Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of people can stop listening at this point because they think that they agree with you. God has provided the material, and people who don't think that the Bible is God inspired are simply not going to agree. And so there's a superficial way to just shortcut the debate right there. Mm-hmm. Let's see if we can get beyond that superficial thing, though.
Cool. Okay. So in the first place, just stating this in or out thing, you admit the Bible itself, the New Testament writings itself, portray clear cases of these guys are out, these guys going to hell. These are fake Christians or false teachers, and I give in my blog several examples of that. So there were at least.
I don't know if I agree with that statement as it's made. Okay. I agree that there are people that Paul inveighed against, but again, we're assuming that Paul gets to say who is and who isn't a real Christian.
Okay. So,
Because
and
there
he
were
was an
some people that Paul seemed to think were real Christians that if I saw those people in a church today, I would think you're not a real Christian because you're. So I don't know that I accept out of hand that Paul's opinion on who was a real Christian and who wasn't constitutes an authoritative statement on who was and who wasn't a real Christian.
Gotcha. So, and it's based on the fact that he was an apostle. He had apostolic authority. He was an inspired person. So, yeah, how do we know that? It ultimately comes down to God has provided us divine revelation in the form of the Bible. So this carries with it the authority to define and say who's in, who's out. Um, and I provided an argument. I have three reasons as to why. That was a different show where I think I covered that in the sufficient attachment show, and I gave three reasons as to why the Bible as a whole, good, bad, the ugly, it is sufficiently attached to real Christianity. So you need to use that to define your terms as to what Christianity is or isn't. Now, the subject of today's discussion that I want to get David's critique on is okay, well, how do we use the Bible to define what is real Christianity, what is fake Christianity? And my method is, or my way of doing that, as I've outlined before on the show, is look, we let the Bible itself speak to us. So if there is an explicit verse that says this is required for salvation, there are verses to that effect as opposed, repent is a direct, explicit command. Believing Jesus died and rose from the dead are examples of explicit commands. Believe this or do this, or be damned, or you won't be saved. Do this to get eternal life. These are explicit things that we know. Well, whatever else real Christianity is, it is this. This is included in that set of propositions, beliefs, or practices that are required to be in versus out. There's also implicit verses. So I would actually say not being a homosexual or not lying, or sorry, the intention not to sin in whatever form that sin is. These are implied through explicit teachings that say, you have to obey the commands of Jesus in order to be saved. You have to be willing to repent, turn 180, and commit yourselves to obeying the commands of God or Jesus. We fall short of that, of course, but it's in the intention of being willing to obey Jesus in everything. So by implication, the command to take part in communion, even though it isn't explicit, it doesn't say take part in communion and you will have eternal life. It's implied based on the fact that there's an explicit command to follow Jesus, obey Jesus' commands to be saved, and then that implies, well, Jesus commanded take part in communion, therefore it's essential that I take part in communion as obeying that commandment. I can't just say, poof, I don't care about following that commandment. So that is what I think. It's such a simple method for determining what is essential or not. It doesn't involve any headcanon about, oh, well, I have a separate argument for biblical inerrancy, therefore everything in the Bible has to be essential. No, you're going beyond what the evidence is. At least my headcanon is letting the Bible speak for itself. It's a minimalistic case. It doesn't exclude Christians based on secondary doctrines and that sort of thing. It says whatever real Christianity is, we know 100% it is this. So we do have a way for adjudicating and separating people out. That's sort of my method as to how I think the essential doctrines and practices of Christianity proper should be defined. And I'll turn it over to you, David. Yeah. What's wrong with that?
Yeah, well, I disagree.
Okay.
I think so. I think there are very few places where the Bible lays out very specific doctrines and says believe this and do that or else.
Yeah.
So, if you tried to collect all of the places where you would say the Bible says that, you would maybe have a handful of ideas, loosely related ideas, but you wouldn't have the Christian religion. You wouldn't have the church institution based on that.
Right.
So I don't think that criteria really works in the practical world that much. I mean, so you can say, well, yeah, for these handful of things, that definitely is a part of the institutional church, but it's not a big enough part of it to form a church off of. So you got to go beyond that if you're going to come up with the laws and bylaws, and I can use the word constitution, the creed of the Christian church.
Right. So, but at the bottom line is, number one, we've got a real Christianity. Even if there's only one proposition, that constitutes real Christianity. So we've established that there is a real Christianity in this way. As to whether we should go,
yeah, no, I don't think that we have, though, and so I'm trying to give this argument of yours as much due as I can. You would have something, but you wouldn't have a religion. So I don't know what I would call the something that you have. We just take the handful of thou shalt and thou shalt nots and put them in a bag. I don't know what you've got there.
Actually, we would have a religion, but this is a point of how do you define what a religion is? And I've put a lot of thought into this and looked at, before I began my research, what is a religion? Because my definition includes something like Taoism, but Confucianism, that's not a religion. That's just a socio-political philosophy or something. But there's two basic fundamental criteria. It addresses the ultimate reality, whatever that may entail. So that includes Eastern religions, God of some sort in the Western religions, and it describes our ultimate purpose in the universe and how to achieve it. With these two facets, you're a religion. If you address those two facets, then you can't qualify as a religion to me. And my way of determining the essential doctrines of Christianity would fit that definition, if that makes sense.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I find myself a little unimpressed by your definition, though, of what constitutes orthodoxy. It has to be a "Thus saith the Lord." The Bible says this, or else you're going to go to hell. And I'm still stuck with the idea that those things are so few.
But that's good.
The Christian religion is bigger than those things, and so those things somehow don't define the Christian religion that we have today. And furthermore, if it was that simple, we would have near 100% agreement within Christianity itself, and we do not.
Right. Let me.
So I don't. If you are right in your assessment, then almost everybody else is wrong.
Well, this is a common view. Marvin, for example, adopts this. Gary Habermas, William Lane Craig. I provided charts. He has his little circle chart where they all agree with me. So this is a common mainstream view that I'm advancing.
You can claim. So this is one of the objections that I've had to you in the last season. I'm sure we'll do some more of it this season. But you make this claim that the tenets of the of the Orthodox Christian faith, the essentials are obvious, that everybody knows them and everybody agrees with them, And that just fails on the basis of lived reality. The lived reality is there are over 30,000 Christian denominations in the U.S. alone. And they do not all agree on what is essential. The lived reality is, especially among us skeptics who aren't going to just one church, is that Christians don't agree on very important things. And so there's not some simple formula out there that shows you what's important and what's not. Because if there is, you've got to make the case then that all the Christians are stupid or something. They don't know what it is.
Well, they could be.
So my lived reality, and I think the lived reality of most people listening to this podcast, is that Christians do not agree on what is and what is not essential, and all of your protestations to the contrary just fall on deaf ears.
Okay, but we've already seen that just looking at what self-professing Christians say is essential is not a valid way to establish that what is or isn't real Christianity. That we agreed on that at the beginning of the show, and it took away I had all these questions to try and get to that point, but you just gave it to me. So that is irrelevant as to 30,000.
That's me. I'm a giver.
No, thank you, because we're trying to get to truth. We're not trying to score points, I hope.
No.
So
especially since I have all the points. So I mean, I don't want to score any more points.
Yeah, well, I don't think you did, but I wasn't convinced by your reasons personally, and I was.
You were too. You were a secret atheist. Come on.
You weren't supposed to tell anyone that. Come on, man.
Sorry.
But yeah. So with my method, I think this is clear. Given that we can establish the Bible sufficiently attached, and like I said, that's a presupposition, and if I were putting my notes, I would just give that as a presupposition in our other show. Then using the Bible to define what is essential and what is not is perfectly sensible. I mean, there's no other game.
Yeah, it's perfectly sensible, but even the people who agree with you with sufficient attachment, as you know I do not agree on what's essential. So
but what are
once
the
again,
reasons?
you're just claiming that it should produce agreement that in reality it does not produce.
But the reality is irrelevant, right? Because that's why I gave that point that you were a giver on, because there can be any number of reasons why those 30,000 denominations, and by the way, those 30,000 denominations probably have widespread agreement on the essential doctrines.
Yeah, except they don't have enough agreement to worship together.
Correct.
And so I would argue that their division is not just apparent; it runs deep to the core.
So no, but it's not. So David, one guy in my church couldn't abide being in that church anymore. He went and he actually started up his own denomination. What was the reason? Oh, because he changed, instead of, there was an official title. So instead of being a deacon, in Canadian law, you have to be called an elder to be tax exempt or something. And you're going to call me an elder and not a deacon? Fine, I'm out of here. That is not an essential reason to split. That's his fault. That's him being stupid.
Actually, but he thinks it's an essential reason.
But it's
and I don't know that he's wrong, actually.
Oh, okay.
You're briefly talking about that. I don't think he's wrong.
I think God has provided us a means or a mechanism for determining whether that guy is right or wrong. We have an objective standard.
If the state is telling you what title you should be using for, officers that are at least, theoretically appointed by God, then those people aren't really appointed by God. They're appointed by the state. If the state starts giving you criteria for what a deacon can and can't be, or what qualifies as a deacon, then you're not the church anymore. You're just a state institution. I agree with them.
Gotcha.
He should leave. He did the right thing.
But you
have abandoned orthodoxy.
Okay, but he would recognize that, no, he would not say that. He would not say it's an essential doctrine. It's just a matter of principle for him,
Okay, well,
kind
he
of
may
thing.
not he may not say it, but if he just split the church over a non-essential doctrine, then he's got to be stepping on another essential doctrine, which is unity over division. It, for a church to divide and still stay somewhat consistent with what they think the Bible says, it has to be over an essential doctrine, because division over non-essential doctrines isn't allowed.
No, it is actually. I this is where we find I'm much more American than you. I actually think that God, on secondary doctrines, things that are not identified either explicitly or implicitly as being essential, we are allowed to have differences of opinion, and that could be good. It practically speaking, there are bad instances when it's mixed with sinful pride or
Yes,
that sort
we
of
are
thing.
allowed to have
But
differences of opinion. We're not allowed to split the church over our differences of opinion. This is the
well,
point.
well,
We
no,
don't, we're allowed to have differences of opinion, between states in the United States of America. We're not allowed to secede.
well, first of all, you could be. I'm sure there's a formula if a state did want to secede. I remember
No,
hearing
there
there
isn't.
isn't.
The
You
formula is war. Oh,
seriously?
did
There's
you did
no.
you want
Well,
to secede?
okay. Well, in Canada, we have ability to provinces have the ability to leave the union. Quebec's done it three
It's
times, I
the
think. So
United States of America.
okay,
No,
I
but it's
remember.
not like it's not like Canada's a real country. I mean, no one's comparing it to anything.
Well,
I'm
I
just
I remember hearing Texas at one time was doing
Oh
something.
God, Texas is always making noise about this.
Okay, well, I
We're
don't
a
know
whole other
American.
country. There are
The,
many of us that wish
the
Texas was a whole other country.
the point is though, people, individual Christians can see unity is important. Yes, we. I think it's wrong to split the church over trivial matters like that, but even secondary issues can be important enough to create a new church in. There could be, and there's no problem with that. Like, for example, with there's confusion.
Okay,
Okay,
well,
does the
but
Bible teach the
if both of
ransom
them are
theory?
claiming orthodoxy, just back up for a second. You think that it's okay to split the church on secondary issues, but those churches that split are claiming orthodoxy. The
Yeah,
guy who walked out of your church believes that he has the bead on the original intent of the church. And your church thinks that they have the bead on the original intent of the church. And you both think each other is wrong.
no, but we're both Orthodox. Given the Bible would say that both are Orthodox because that issue doesn't matter. Whatever side you're on, whether you want to call yourself a deacon or an elder, is not essential to salvation. Now, you are correct that I want to make this clear. I'm speaking as a minimalist. This is a minimalist definition. I obviously believe that the entire Bible is inspired. I believe Moses existed. But I think that someone can believe that Moses didn't exist and still be a real Christian because that's not an essential doctrine, even if it's very
Wait,
probably.
whoa, wait. So just a quick call to the commenters. Christians, please step up to the plate. Former Christians, please step up to the plate. Dale has just invited you to engage in a poll. Do you believe that Moses mythicism is a-okay?
It's not that I
So
think it's a okay. So I would put it.
I think that would disqualify a person from Christianity, and
No, it wouldn't.
the Christian, the type of Christian that I would say that would disqualify you. If you're saying no, the Bible is lying about Moses.
It, it would not.
Yeah, you're not a Christian.
Okay, so but no, you're not. So the Bible, I agree with you that the Bible teaches Moses was a real person. If he wasn't, then that's an error in the Bible. But that someone can believe something erroneous and still be considered a Christian. We know that
Yeah,
the New
I'm just
Testament.
saying they couldn't believe that. That would not be on the list of things where it's okay to be wrong about.
But how do you determine that, though? See, this is the thing. I have my method for determining from the Bible itself. There's no verse that explicitly says you must believe in Moses to be saved, or you must believe that or is implied. Like there's no verse that says you must believe in the historicity and total accurate representation historically of every single figure in the Old Testament. If you had something like that, then my method would say, yeah, believing in Moses is essential. Um, I find that very problematic. I would agree with skeptics that the significance, if it turns out that Moses didn't exist, that would very probably, I'm 80% convinced that would prove Christianity is a false religion. So I'm on skeptics' side on the majority part, but it's still there. You can't prove it's an essential doctrine. So it's possible that one could deny it and still adhere to the essential doctrines of Christianity.
See,
Therefore,
this
you're
is why making appeals to the Bible for what is essential is almost fruitless, because here you're saying one of the more central figures to two religions. It's okay to think that the Bible is lying about it and still be in right standing with God.
yes.
And if you can believe that the Bible is wrong about that and still be okay, then I don't see how you use the Bible at all to talk about what is or isn't orthodox. Because someone can just disagree with it. Which, by the way, is what has happened over history, which is why we have so many denominations. And so it's a meaningless exercise at that point to me. I don't even know what we're talking about anymore. If I could say, yeah, Moses wasn't real, but it's okay.
I don't want to get into repeating terms, but I have an argument. Remember the undue confusion. This is an argument I adopted from an atheist philosopher, Michael Martin, who uses it to attack Christianity, and it's the notion of evaluating the significance in terms of undue confusion that allows me to give these grades to the significance. No, as I said, it's not just it's a-okay if Moses does. No, very probably that's not a-okay. That would prove Christianity is false. And I'm
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the person believing it is a-okay, and that if they die believing that, they'd still go to heaven. They're still in good standing.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that any church that I think of as Orthodox would consider that a heretic.
Okay, cool.
That person would be speaking a heretical doctrine. He would be a Marcionite or worse.
Okay, I agreed. My pastor would also say this, and he has said this. So great. I disagree. We've agreed, and you've conceded and given to me that just appealing to self-professing Christians' opinions is irrelevant. So there has to be an objective reason.
And so appealing to Scripture is irrelevant too.
No. But I want to hear what's your headcanon. Remember, I asked you this before. So there are, for example, Norman Geisler will appeal to a philosophical, logical argument, a deductive argument, to try and prove that biblical inerrancy is based on God being a perfect, maximally great being or perfect being. His revelation would have to be perfect, and then he stopped short on saying perfectly preserved, which I think is his fault. If it was perfect, if it has to be perfect in the original, it would have to be perfect in the preservation, given his argument. Other Christians have made deductive arguments. Well, Jesus taught biblical inerrancy, therefore we ought to believe biblical inerrancy as well. So these are a couple of ways that those Christians that you're appealing to, this is what they have in mind. I say that biblical inerrancy is an essential doctrine because I've got this argument, whether it's conscious on their part or subconscious, they've got this notion, and that's what's, you've got to spell that out. And I think when you do that, you find that the premises are false. Therefore, any Christian that says biblical inerrancy is essential is wrong. They're basing that on subconsciously.
I did not come prepared to argue biblical inerrancy. I think that everyone knows I'm prepared. I do believe that inerrancy is the way the Bible is intended to be read, and I can argue that, but I'm not. I don't have a.
And I don't mean to
PowerPoint to give you today, but I'll give you a shorthand version, though. I mean, the shorthand is actually much simpler than what you're saying. I think the shorthand would be the Bible is God breathed, And what is God breathed is understandable and true. And every bit of it is God breathed, and therefore every bit of it has to be accurate. And if one bit of it is not God breathed, then it's not the Bible. And it's as simple as that. And so if you're even on a minor detail, if you're saying, well, the writers were wrong about that, but that's an unimportant detail. What you're saying is, well, the writers aren't God, and this thing that's in the Bible really isn't the Bible. And you're bringing the entire Bible into question now, because, it's between these two covers that says the Holy Bible. And so now I've got to try to figure out, well, what is or isn't the Bible?
Gotcha.
So there can't be any minor details that are wrong about something that God said.
Gotcha.
Because I didn't worship a God that could be wrong about anything.
Gotcha. Perfect. So just for the audience, and I'm not going to get into this because I don't want to be unfair. David's position is the same as Norman Geisler. That's the argument, the headcanon that Christians like David, or former Christians like David and Norman Geisler have in mind. Exactly what you just said, only they spell it out in a little bit more deductive detail. I don't
which I can do if that's the topic that I'm gonna
exactly.
I'm just trying to give a nutshell.
Yep, exactly. So perfect. So I don't buy that. I've seen the arguments. They have certain false premises. I myself, I had that same argument myself when I believed in biblical inerrancy, but I found that headcanon can be falsified without going into the details. And so therefore
the fact that it can be falsified doesn't mean that, well, what it can let me take that back. I think I misunderstand what you're saying. You're saying the idea itself can be falsified, not that it can illuminate falsifiable things.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So there's either got to be another way, such as my way, for determining the essential doctrines, or perhaps there's just no way, whatever. But
well, which is what I said.
But you haven't falsified my idea so far as I've seen. My way for determining, based on, we know the Bible's sufficiently attached. That's my presupposition for this episode.
Right, and I didn't come today to argue sufficient attachment either.
Correct.
Since we have both argued that too. But I would say that you would have to accept a number of presuppositions that you're proposing to make your case. And in that case, you would be moving from not making a positive claim to making a positive claim.
Okay, so not making a positive claim. Why is it wrong to? Okay, well, you covered that.
You came into the podcast not making a positive claim.
Exactly. So so that's why
I didn't come to argue any positive claim that you were making.
Yep, that's a fair enough point. Okay, so I'll just my method for we know that the Bible is the Word of God, and given that, the Bible proclaims that certain propositions or beliefs or doctrines and or practices are essential to achieving your salvation versus being damned. That's an undeniable fact, that those are there. So real Christianity can minimally be defined as at least that. So that's a start. That gives us a real Christianity that we can sink our teeth into, that we can work with and use to settle.
Well, I think it runs afoul of another principle that I included, though, and it's a more practical principle that even if I granted you the point you're trying to make, it still doesn't win the day, because orthodoxy has to be. There must be agreement among the adherents, and I would still say that there's so much disagreement among Christians on what constitutes orthodoxy and what constitutes the essentials of the Christian faith, that in practical terms, your argument just doesn't pan out. So once again, your argument amounts to the Bible should be sufficient to show us what is necessary.
Yeah.
And I am arguing practically, but it's not.
Well, you can't say practically it's not. You can just say practically.
Well, in reality, in the reality super real world that we all live in, it's not.
No,
it's not sufficient.
No, you can't say that, because practically it is sufficient. But what you can say is practically it doesn't do the trick. It's just a fact.
Okay, well then
reality
I will allow that correction then. Practically it doesn't. But the difference between doesn't and can't in this case for me is without distinction. I mean, you can prove that it can by proving that it does. And you can't. So the fact of the matter is division abounds among people who think like you. So that it is insufficient to say, well, the Bible should resolve all the differences and show you clearly what is and isn't orthodox.
Are you open though?
Doesn't.
Are you open though that the reason it doesn't could be the fault of the people in any way? Couldn't certainly you skeptics always come after Christian? Oh, you're letting your bias get to you. You're just reacting emotionally, or you're in. You've said to me, I'm in defensive mode, and I'm not. I've got my. You called me an ostrich with my head in the sand. Is that my fault, or is that? Are you going to blame the Bible?
It was really quite funnier when I said it. I just want to.
Well, I'm not a comedian.
You just kind of flattened it out.
Okay, fair enough. But
the way you say it, it sounds like an insult.
Let's. Well, yeah. If let's pretend that's the case. I was an ostrich with my head in the sand for that. Whatever we were disputing there. Does that mean that there is no real Christianity, or would you just say, Dale, get your dang head out of the sand and pay attention to the truth and try to figure it out? If it was true and I was just being in defensive mode and putting my head in the sand, that's my fault. That's why I disagree. Isn't that possible?
Well, I suppose that's possible, but once again, we have to revert to the practical. So there's this ideal that you keep pointing to.
Okay.
But the ideal does not match the lived reality. And at some point in terms of religion, especially a religion that is supposed to be supernaturally led by a supernatural being, the ideal should match reality, because the supernatural magical being should be able to overcome all of our human foibles to make this thing happen. So I don't think it is sufficient to just blame humans for humaning. I mean, we're just being humans. And the Christians that I know, most of them anyway, are doing the best they can. Some of them I think are insincere. And have bad motives and so forth. But I don't want to go there for everybody or say that as a generality. Mm-hmm. I think that most people are doing the best they can, and the fact is, using their best lights in the tools that they think God has given them, they keep coming up with different ideas of what is and isn't essential. So no, I don't think it's fair to blame individuals in this case. I think that the Holy Spirit has to spirit better than humans human.
Yeah, I disagree with that fundamentally. The Holy Spirit is constrained by obviously.
Then he's useless.
Well,
screw that guy.
No, because God, it's good for God on a non-Calvinist understanding, at least. If Calvinism's true, then what you're saying makes sense. It's just unexplainable, but. On a non-Calvinist understanding with libertarian free will, where we can grieve and quench the Holy Spirit, God doesn't overwhelm us or overpower our free will. He lets us choose kind of thing, and establish patterns of behavior. It's entirely my fault if I act badly or I ignore my conscience and choose
Whatever
to
happened to
sin.
greater is he that is in us than he that is in the world?
You have to be
Well, it
open.
seems like he's not greater than anything.
No, he is if you let him. But that's the thing. It's sometimes you ignore the witness of
Well,
the Holy Spirit and
okay, so
testifying.
then it's useless. It's like you got the shield of faith. God's giving you this great shield, except it's full of holes, and you get crap beat out of you by the enemy all day long. It's not much of a shield. You put
But
on the whole armor of God, and you get the shit kicked out of you every day. I
no, but
don't I don't see what good that is.
so it's more like you're
In practical
punching.
terms, that's meaningless. If it can't stand up to humans just being human with their human foibles doing the best they can, it's no good.
Yeah, but it has the power to do that if he wanted to. It's a he, but he doesn't because he respects our free will as free creatures. So it's more like the shield could we could have a fully functioning shield. Everything bounces off of it, but because of our own sin, right? This is the process of sanctification. You don't become instantly.
But in practical terms, zero people have that. So that's once
Correct.
again that's
Yeah,
the kind of
I think
zero
that's
people have what you're describing could happen.
yes, that's correct. And zero people will ever have that. No human being, at least in this life, prior to death or that sort of thing, or judgment or whatever, will have a completely solid 100% shield. We will continue to punch holes in it and allow Satan to get through.
Which makes the promise of the shield useless. Right.
It's not.
So it's useless. That's that. Look, from a practical term, I don't even care about the theoretical
Mhm.
here in this case. What you're arguing is a kind of a theoretical orthodoxy, in that the Bible is this theoretical solution to Christian division.
Yeah.
But in reality, it is not a solution to Christian division. In fact, the more Christians try to study it, the more divided the church becomes because you know they'll have an insight and they'll be like, oh no, I see the church is wrong about this. This is the truth. I think I need to start another church. There is no 10 people reading the Bible and coming up with the same conclusions because the Spirit led their heart in the same way, and this is how we know that the church is true. It's nothing like that. It's a mess. And so when you say the Bible is the way we know what is essential and orthodox, I just use that same argument and say, look, we got the Bible and we have disagreement on this. And so I don't know what you're talking about. I know what I see and experience every day. I know who I debate with on forums every day. There are people who essentially think the same way as you do, but they would actually disagree with you about what you're saying is essential.
I don't think that's the case. I can't think of a single.
Now, I have no way to adjudicate between the two of you, but you're both.
No, but I think you over exaggerate, even addressing you on a practical level. I don't find this to be the case at all. I think that there's a lot more agreement, especially on the minimal essential doctrines that I provide. I think that everyone agrees that the resurrection is an essential doctrine. Everyone agrees that the 27 books of the New Testament are God's inspired word for Christians. Um, yeah, there's not this widespread disagreement on the core doctrines that you pretend there is. Now, there are obviously you can point to a group like I think that the deity of Jesus. Jesus had as a divine nature is an essential doctrine as taught by the Bible. But you'll just say, well, Jehovah's Witnesses, even though I don't count them as Christians, you would say, but they self-profess as Christians and they deny the deity. Haha, I destroyed that. But that's that does nothing to destroy the truth that there are these core doctrines as disclosed in divine revelation, and divine revelation provides us with a mechanism to know better. Whether we do in fact know better or not, that's a different story. But God has provided the means to adjudicate what is real Christianity or not.
Okay. Well, once again, I'm gonna I'll give you the last word on that.
Oh yeah.
To say that I disagree. I don't see your theory being expressed in the real world that I live in.
Well, why?
So
Why don't? Yeah. Well, why? Like you've seen on the boards, right? Like Marvin and Joyce, for example, both agree with me on.
Marvin and Joyce wouldn't be Christians in any church that I grew up attending. So once again, your theory falls apart at the gates of the real world. So now, granted, I think that a lot of people that I grew up attending church with would be wrong, but wrong, not stupid. They have good reasons for thinking that. Because Marvin and Joyce would disagree with them on things that they considered essential. And it's the same way that many Protestants believe that Catholics are going to hell. And by the way, many Catholics feel the same way about Protestants, but Catholics tend to be a little bit more ecumenical, I think, than a lot of Protestants. It's hard to know between those two feuding sides which one is more convinced that the other is going to hell. But to simply say there's no major disputes about what is essential, it just ignores the reality lived by millions of people. And so once again, I'm not taking it upon myself to solve the dispute because I don't care. I'm an outsider to this mess. It's not my mess anymore. But if you're saying that the Bible is some magic bullet way of solving these kinds of disputes, you're going to have to show me in practical terms where that is happening, and not just suggest that it should happen.
Well,
so I don't care what should happen.
The way the way I see it is there's really three fundamental positions that Christians fall into. So there's the category of the minimalist, which is my position and is held by the vast majority of evangelical and Protestant Christians. This is a mainstream view. I hope can I just ask this and be honest, even if it'll annoy me or whatever, but do you see my method for determining it as ridiculous, or can you at least say this is an option on the table?
I think it's a cop-out.
Okay.
I think it's a way of trying to smooth over the obvious problem of we've got a major disagreement problem in the church, and so let's just talk about this theory thing over here. Let's talk about the philosophy of agreement, and not deal with the actual problem of disagreement.
Mm-hmm.
And so you want to try to get me to agree in some general terms on the philosophy of how Christians should agree, and I don't give a damn about the philosophy of how you should agree. Because your philosophy doesn't work in the real world. And that's all I care about. And so as an outsider looking in, all I can say is the stuff that you say should be working doesn't seem to work. Doesn't look like that to me.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Look, it's better, all else being equal. And in the real world, all else isn't equal, so that's why it doesn't obtain. But all else being equal, it would be better to have absolute truth on everything, on every issue in the Bible. Confusion is a bad thing in and of itself. I would want to know everything that God divinely inspired without confusion at all. Again, that isn't the case. So there has to be a justification or reason for that, and that's where the philosophizing comes into play about undue confusion and Molinistic defeaters, all of that stuff. But so yeah, I'm not avoiding that fact, but I'm trying my best to make sense of the facts that we have and see what is essential and what isn't, and there are those three.
But even if I granted you the point that you're trying to make, I don't think it would help you. Because let's say we grant that the Bible is the final court of arbitration.
Okay.
For that to work, the Bible.
Can I interrupt just to keep before you? If you're gonna forget, go ahead. Go ahead then. Yeah.
Well, okay. So I wasn't trying to interrupt your point. I was trying to find a way to grant you as much of your point as possible.
Well, okay. So let me say this then, and that, because I think what you're about to say is gonna work well. So I said there are three. I think there are only three categories of Christians on this front, or positions that Christians take. There's not this wide plethora of to each his own. I think there are three things. There's the minimalists like me. Then there are the entire Bible is inerrant, so everything in the Bible defines Christianity. And then there are Catholic Bible plus Christians, so Catholics, Eastern Orthodox. They have additional authorities of some kind that provide additional doctrines, and those are the three main categories. There isn't any Christians that go, oh yeah, Jesus, deity, death, and resurrection, plus Moses, plus Jonah in the belly of the fish or the whale, but that's it. Outside of that, no, nothing else. I think these are the vast majority of Christians fit into one of these three categories for how they define Christianity proper. So yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think much of the minimalist view. I know a lot of people take it today.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of your favorite new apologists take it today. But once again, I think the reason we get the minimalist view is to help Christians get out of trouble. Because taking the more traditional view, I don't think the minimalist view is the traditional view. Taking a more traditional view turns out was not a good position when the atheists started pushing back in showing where the flaws were. And so I think that a lot of Christians have fallen back on a kind of a minimalist view so that they can get out of these terrible Bible issues when they come up, and they don't have to get stuck with some of that baggage. So again, that's something that we will talk about in another show, I'm sure. But ultimately, if I grant you your argument, if I grant you your minimalist view, it still doesn't help, because for the Bible to be useful, even in that minimalist sense, it has to be clear and perfectly understandable. It is not. And I know that you're talking about undue confusion, all that, but there is enough confusion so that average person, between one person in the pew and the one sitting next to them, don't agree. There's plenty of confusion about that, and so it's not clear. And there also have to be people set aside constitutionally. This is from the beginning, who were set aside to clarify things that were unclear, so that if there were disputes, kind of like in Judaism. In Judaism, it was, they had a set of laws. If the laws were unclear, they had courts. They had lower courts and higher courts. They had ways of settling those disputes. Christianity doesn't have any of that stuff. And so, you can argue that it's the roots of orthodoxy, but since there is no way to really sort out those disputes, no side can claim orthodoxy simply by appealing to an unclear piece of source material.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think we've covered everything, all your main points. Yeah, I think it was a good compliment.
Have we covered your main objections? Do you have?
You mean to your blog, like the failed skeptical objections part? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, do you have because you wrote some things in your write-up that I think that you probably didn't cover here. Was there any of that you think is relevant?
Not in terms of the main point. These were things that you were bringing up, like, oh well, Jesus doesn't teach any doctrines at all, and he does. I gave some examples of where he teaches doctrines.
Yes, I will concede that Jesus teaches some doctrines, but I think my main point still stands there that he wasn't the doctrines he taught was not in service of trying to create an institutional religion.
Right.
And so, in terms of saying, well, this is an orthodox view of the institutional religion, Jesus wasn't doing that.
Gotcha. And he did set up the apostles to do that. He said they would be providentially in charge of doing that. It wasn't his role. That was the Holy Spirit's role to guide the apostles to set up, eldership and all of the institutional issues. But yeah,
Right, and
notice
that's
that
an argument that we've probably waited too long to make now, since we're probably going into hour 4.
we're above 2 hours,
But
so yeah.
we
Well,
might swing back around to that. But I did think about what if you went that direction? So let's just say I have a response to that, but it's probably not worth going into right now. I will leave you with some dignity so that you can say, well, you had a sliver of a chance. There's that argument that David didn't answer. We'll just leave that dangling. Maybe we'll get to it in the comments.
all right, sounds
So,
good.
and so let me
Canon?
close out
Okay.
just my closing statement here, because I just want to revisit the whole idea of orthodoxy and why people use it in the first place. What Christians are trying to do when they point out that they have the orthodox positions, what they're trying to say is, I got the right answer and you're wrong. I am the one that is expressing the intention of the founder, and you are not. And even if they think the other person is not going to go to hell for thinking about it, the whole idea of claiming orthodoxy is claiming that you're more right. And I would say that there are extreme limits to orthodoxy. So even if it were possible to discover something that fit into my definition, my very specific definition of what is orthodox in Christian religion, there are limits. Orthodoxy can only tell us what the founders intended. It can't tell us what is right or what is best. So I've already given a few examples of this as we talked today. We can talk about the orthodox biblical view of slavery, but it's wrong and atrocious, so I don't care. We can talk about the orthodox view of adultery, that adulterers should be put to death, but that is wrong and backward, and I don't care. There are a lot of things like it. We can talk about, if you want to say that Paul is an author of orthodoxy, which I think is a stretch, then we can talk about women going to church with their head covered. Oh, Paul was wrong and stupid, and I don't care. So orthodoxy can only tell us the original intent of the founders. It can't tell us what's right and what's best. Another limitation of orthodoxy is that orthodoxy seldom has in it a method that allows it to be updated or even discarded. The U.S. Constitution is an example of good orthodoxy, where it does have a built-in mechanism to be updated. And if necessary, a well-formed militia to overthrow the government, if necessary. So that's an interesting idea. Christianity does not really have this mechanism where we can later say, yeah, I think that the apostles were wrong about this. We need to change that. There's no mechanism for saying God's representatives are wrong or their views are outdated. And so that is problematic for orthodoxy. And finally, bad orthodox views poison the whole institution. So if you are claiming orthodoxy, and the view that you are claiming that is orthodox is a bad view, then your religion is bad and it should be discarded and ignored. So if in fact it is true that the orthodox view of homosexuality is that homosexuality is an abomination and that homosexuals should be put to death and that they're going to hell, your religion is stupid and should be ignored. So I don't actually care if that is the Orthodox view. So even as Christians argue this, and I think that not one Christian has a single leg to stand on in suggesting that they're more Orthodox than someone else. Even if they did, it's extremely limited in what it gets you. And so I would suggest to the Christian who's arguing with the well-informed skeptic, don't argue orthodoxy. You're going to lose.
Okay. So yeah, in closing, I think there are two fundamental things to get straight with this issue, and the first is that there are ontological versus epistemological issues on defining orthodoxy. My main concern was on the ontology aspect. Is there a real Christianity? Is there this, I think David would call it a theoretical set of propositions or practices or doctrines, whatever you want to call it, that define real Christianity? And I haven't seen any reason to deny that there is such a thing, given that David, and I've seen every reason to think that there is such a thing. That holds regardless of any epistemological gray zones. Maybe there's confusion, or there's some people that don't know what that ontological reality or real Christianity is. On the second front, that's where I came in as a Christian, and I tried to speak to that issue. Well, God has provided a mechanism or a means that I think is perfectly valid as to how a Christian hypothetically could come to know that through God's word and help of the Holy Spirit and prayerful meditation, that sort of thing. The second major aspect to leave you guys with sort of relates to the Bible and canonicity, which we didn't discuss at all, but that's in the blogs for you guys. But we have to remember that something like getting the Bible, canonicity of the Bible, is an artifact of divine revelation. It's not an object of divine revelation. We're not required to have a divine authority to tell us which books belong in the Bible or that sort of thing. Now, the reason I bring this up here, the main point here is we have to recognize God's providential arrangement of things towards his ends. And God knows ontologically what real Christianity is. Even if human beings, it takes time for us to come to know what that ontological reality is. And in hindsight, it's perfectly valid to go, well, this is what real Christianity is. It's defined by the Bible. These are the books of the Bible. The books of the Bible define what Christianity is. So you're allowed to recognize God's providential work in how we have come to define what real Christianity is throughout history. So yeah, thank you guys for listening. Next week is going to be my turn to pick a topic, and I've picked one that I think David will appreciate. It's a scriptural one, and I'm going to be calling it the problem of skeptical parallelomania. So we're actually going to be looking at the doctrine of creation. Was that borrowed from Egyptian or Babylonian myths or not? And I'm going to be saying they weren't. So yeah.
Okay. What'd you say? Wait a minute. I'm sorry. I tripped out on some bad drugs. What'd you say this was called again?
The problem of parallelomania. Parallelomania.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. Like seeing parallels everywhere.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. No, that wasn't the bad drugs. You actually said that. All right.
It is a term.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that should be interesting, I guess.
Really? Right? I thought that would be something you would appreciate, because you like going back to creation and seeing if it's...
I do. We'll see what I can dig up on Egyptian myth and so forth. I mean, it's an interesting question as to whether there's a scientific foundation in the creation myth, but I'm not entirely sure I care where it came from. It's still a myth. So it wouldn't matter to me if Job made it up or if Josiah made it up, or it Egyptians made it up. I don't care. We're myth-making machines. We make up lots of myths.
Okay. Okay, that's interesting. I when I picked this out, it was something short that I don't have to um, put a lot of effort into researching since I'm doing the Leibnizian thing. But at the same time, I thought, you like to say, oh, well, there's the motifs of water. I heard you with Helen Painter going over that water and darkness, and I think you hinted that it might have been borrowed from these cultures. So that's why I picked that. But
Oh, well, I think a lot of things were borrowed from a lot of cultures. There's a lot of syncretism that's been going on for a long time. So that's ultimately, I don't care where the origin of it was. I don't know that we can trace the origin of a lot of these stories. I mean, the Genesis story, widely believed to come from at least two different lines of storytelling, and it's a little bit hard sometimes to see where one line ends and the other begins. But ultimately, that's not what matters to me. But I will make a good argument after I see what you have to say about it next week. So we'll see.
sounds good.
I mean, the important thing for the audience to recognize is whatever happens, you're wrong.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So, I think that we can work something out.
That's what beloved Tyler B seems to think. What does he want to change the name of our show to David Pummel's Dale Again show?
I was not going to mention this, so now you make me want to look it up. So this has been another episode of DPDA, and we'll see you next week.
Bye bye, everyone.